Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Namaste to the nice Arohana with Sudesh Venkatesh, Chief People Officer of Azim Premji Foundation and University. We will be starting very shortly. Please bear with us.
I'm there, Sanjay.
Welcome, Sudesh.
Yeah.
So we'll just wait for another minute before we open it up.
Sure.
So it's, I think, 6 minutes past 4. We might as well start now in the interest of time. So namaste once again and welcome to everybody to the nice Arohana session on managing people, teams, and everything you wanted to know about people leadership, motivation, and management from a veteran from the industry. And what we will do now is, as always, we will move to the, one second, where's this? Gosh, it's very, the housekeeping tips that we usually put out before every session. All participants, will be unmuted, and there will be time to, in the end, for your questions. Please post all your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And all further interactions we will have on email. Please do not feel that just because a question has not been answered, it will not be responded to. That's not the case. Please email us at arohana@niceorg.in, and we will respond to your messages in consultation with the speaker. Please do visit the website, niceorg.in. And this session is also being streamed live on Facebook at facebook.com/niceorg. And to stay connected, please join our LinkedIn group, Nice Arohana. The LinkedIn group detail is mentioned there in the link. You can note it down. You can take a screenshot. You can take a picture, and please do join. And all these sessions will be recorded and you can view them on YouTube. The bit.ly link is also visible there, and you can view it subsequently. It takes about 48 hours or 72 hours for the entire recording to be put up on YouTube. So this evening, we are very fortunate to have with us Sudesh Venkatesh, Chief People Officer of the Azim Premji Foundation, on building and managing teams. One of the most critical aspects of any venture is about its people, how they are led, how they are motivated, how they work together, how do you manage conflict, and a variety of issues. And we have with us Sudesh, extremely experienced and very, very important for all of us to get to learn from his insights and experience. And so very warm welcome to you, Sudesh.
Thanks, Sanjay.
And so let me now jump straight into the session itself. And what I'm going to do is going to stop the screen share. We will talk about the whole business about managing and leading teams. So there's, you've got an extraordinary diversity of experience. You worked with an internet startup, Planet Asia. You worked with one of India's top companies, which is an epitome of its highly, let's say, well-developed management practices, namely Asian Paints, very successful company. You worked for a giant multinational corporation, Tesco, and now you work for a giant not-for-profit entity, the Azim Premji Foundation. So this is an amazing mix of experiences, small to large, Indian to multinational, profit and non-profit. And therefore, over the past about 30 years of having worked in all of these kinds of companies, what are the commonalities you have observed? What are the differences? Just help us understand that.
Am I audible, Sanjay?
Yeah, I think you need to speak up a little bit, Sudesh.
Okay. Yeah. Is this better?
A little better, yeah. But perhaps maybe you will need to come a little closer, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Uh, yeah. See, first of all, I have been fortunate to have been part of organizations which were leaders in their respective sectors, right? I mean, Asian Paints, number one paint company in the developing world, Tesco, the number one British retailer, and now Azim Premji Foundation. And even Planet Asia, an internet startup, was a company which was ahead of its time. It didn't fulfill its promise is a different matter, but I have been very fortunate to be part of very good organizations and with good people. So whatever I say now is what I have learned there. See, okay, just one sec.
Is my voice better now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. All right. So, what I have learned is, people are people wherever they are. They are a bundle of thoughts, aspirations, feelings, and different organizations have different dominant streaks. Asian Paints will be a particular kind of organization, and Azim Premji Foundation will be a particular kind of organization. There will be a certain dominant streak. And this is a function of the purpose for which the organization exists, the leadership style of people who are there, and the incentive mechanisms that have been built in for people to come and work there, right?
Right.
And we also know that like begets like, so therefore, organizations tend to perpetuate themselves in some form. Now, the people management itself, therefore, naturally will vary from organization to organization. So while there will be some commonalities, there will be some differences, right?
Right.
Now, let me talk about what are the commonalities that I have seen. And all these organizations are good and successful for a reason, right? And if I just look at the people element of it, all these organizations I have found in common are they recruit very carefully. They invest in developing their people. The methods may be different, but they do groom people, including rotating people across functions and the like. They review their talent very carefully, getting the right people into the right jobs. They emphasize and live their values. And they also let go of people if things are not working out. This is what I have found is common to all these 4 organizations that I have worked for. So it's in some way you can imagine it's like cultivating a garden or an orchard. You sort of bring the right plants in, you groom you sort of water them well, and if something needs to be pruned, it needs to be pruned, etc. Right? So it's a bit. Now let me go to the differences, right? And I will have to speak of each organization a little more so that people get differences. See, Asian Paints hugely successful because I think one, it has stuck to the knitting. It's a paints company, it's a home decor company now, and they have invested, reinvested, and built capacities, formidable capacities, right? They're meritocratic to a fault. I can elaborate on each of this at the end, but I'll just quickly run through what I feel are the reasons why these companies are what they are, right? There's a clear separation of ownership, governance, and management. They're very aggressive in the market, but very ethical at the same time in their operations. It's an organization where the institution is placed ahead of self. And like somebody once told me, it's an organization which is both penny wise and pound wise.
Yes, well said.
And it believes that there is no long term without the short term, carefully mentors people, and encourages interfunctional movements. For example, I was myself, I started off in sales, I did a bit of operations and then moved to human resources. So it's very, very common in Asian Paints. So this is one example. If I take Planet Asia, the raw energy of a startup was there. It was an eclectic blend of technologists and designers. And like I said before, maybe because of the disruption in the markets, lack of financial muscle, alignment, some of these reasons, it didn't grow to what it could have become. Let me talk about Tesco, right? Tesco, huge multinational, and in fact, the CEO of Walmart once said that, look, I just hate Tesco because they're very good. In Tesco, there is a deep understanding of the business in everyone. For example, they have a program called Tesco Week in a Store, where everybody has to go and spend a week working in the store. There is an emphasis on values. They have a concept called One Team. Good general managers are built over cross-functional movements, cross-country movements, and huge systematic investments made in developing core skills and leadership. That's Tesco. Now, let me close it off with the Azim Premji Foundation, right? The Azim Premji Foundation, there's a kind of a maniacal focus on the purpose. And therefore, the kind of people it attracts and keeps is of a kind, right? The talent reviews are very strong. And there is a significant ability to stay the course. This has, of course, been because, the foundation has been bankrolled by Mr. Premji. Not every organization may have that privilege, but because of all this, the organization is what it is. So hopefully I have covered the commonalities and the differences.
Yes. No, I think you brought out some very, very interesting points, which is extremely relevant, for India today, and particularly for entrepreneurs, where the market conditions are fast changing. There's a lot of competitive pressure. There is there might be temptation to cut corners and all of that. But if you are building a long-term institution, right, it's important while you keep the short-term in mind. The point you made about being competitive yet being ethical, meritocracy, and separation of ownership, management, and governance, and also having the ability to empathize and invest in growing people, right? These are very important takeaways, I think, for all the entrepreneurs and others who are listening in and tuning in. That brings me to the next question, right? I mean, every entity, every organization, every corporation, has a grand statement saying people are our greatest asset, right? And that's a pretty common thing people say. How would you characterize it? Meaning, what would, in your estimation, be a signal that a company is indeed treating people as its greatest asset? And what should, let's say, smaller, younger companies do with regard to that?
Right. See, I think there is nothing more true than this statement. Although it's become a bit of a cliche.
Right.
It's, to my mind, absolutely true, right? Let me just pick up one or two illustrations to make this point, okay? If we look at India's scientific history, one of the finest programs that we have built is the Atomic Energy Program.
Right.
And the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, the Bhabha Atomic Research Center they have been at the forefront of this.
Correct.
Now, if you really look at what went behind it, and if you read the history of these institutions, it was Homi Bhabha's belief that he should pick the right people and empower them and build institutions around them. So if you take TIFR, the entire molecular biology group, which today has become NCBS, was built around Siddiqui, Obed Siddiqui.
Right.
Astrophysics group was built around Srikantan.
Right.
The mathematics group was built around Raghunathan. Now, Bhabha believed that, look, these are the people who will build and sustain institutions. Mm-hmm. It has been proven, right? I'm just taking that illustration You could as well apply that to the space program of the country and Vikram Sarabhai's picking of Satish Dhawan and subsequently many others, right? So people clearly are the ones who make the difference. Now, if I just take that a little further, Sanjay, land, building, machinery, these kinds of things have long receded in criticality, right? Capital, yes. Technology, yes. Brand, yes. They still are important. I don't deny that. But even within all this, the biggest differentiator to my mind is people. And you really can't do anything without the right people.
Correct.
Maybe you can speak a bit about your conversation during the induction when Mr. Premji was asked a question and you were there at Wipro at that time and what he said. So you can add that here.
Yes. I mean, that was almost like over 30 years ago. And, the whole point, and it was absolutely unbelievable that the founder, chairman of the company would take so much time to explain to all the young joinees at that time what the values of the company were, what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable, and therefore, how should a person behave with regard to issues where there was lack of clarity. So I remember one very important statement he made. He says, look, it is easy to know black and white. The problem is when it is gray, what would you do? And his advice was always go on the side of white. And I remember the application form that we all filled up to join the company. It had a very interesting quote there from Peter Drucker. It said, integrity was a very big issue at the company, is that it's very hard to define what integrity is, but it is clear when it is not there. Right. And it is that culture, the constant refrain about, values and behaving in a particular way reinforced a particular kind of behavior, attracted a particular kind of person to the company. So I suppose you're referring to all of that and with regard to the kind of people and all of it, right?
That's right. And the fact that he would always ask, who are the people who will deliver it for me?
Absolutely. I mean, who's the leadership, right?
That's right.
It's very important. I agree. I agree. Yes.
I'll just round this off, Sanjay, with
Yes.
A few more comments on this, statement. People are our greatest asset. See, that's probably the only asset category that can appreciate.
Right.
Everything else depreciates.
Correct.
And engaged people, there is enough research to say that they will deliver unbelievable returns over time. People will be engaged.
Yeah.
That's important. And therefore, attracting and retaining good people is super critical.
Absolutely.
And this is not something you can leave it to chance.
Right.
And it has to be high up on the CEO's agenda.
Correct.
That's,
So which means the CEO needs to spend quality time in attracting and retaining the right kind of people in the company, right?
that's right.
But one that leads me to the next question, which is, everybody, you have people are important, so you hire the good people and all of that. But we've seen examples of companies where there is one superstar leader. We have seen entrepreneurs, with absolute charm and magnetic personalities and the force of their vision that drive everything. And then you've got a bunch of people who are just, let's say, operations type people, right? I mean, who are not genuinely given leadership responsibility. So we have that class of successful companies as well. And then we've got another class where there's actually a team in place where, you've got a CEO, you've got a CFO, you've got somebody heading marketing, blah, 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 right? And it's a team that is all that comes together. And consistently, it is said that teams are more important than individual superstars. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I have seen both kinds of organizations being successful.
Right.
But I think the ones which are built around teams probably are a little more enduring.
Mm-hmm.
That's I don't have too much research to back that, but I'll just talk about some observations, right?
Right.
Somebody once told me that the structure, the organization structure in Apple, when Steve Jobs was there, was like an organization with concentric circles. There was nothing called a hierarchy. There was nothing called an alignment of organization that you normally see.
Right.
It was one magnetic personality, like you described, who would radiate that influence, and people would pick it up, and the vibrations would carry through the organization.
Correct.
It may be a a picturesque way of describing it, but that's what probably it was, and a hugely successful organization on one hand. See, the whole aspect of teamwork, this is easier said than done. And, to my mind, you have talked about this, VCs back good teams. I've heard you say that.
Yeah.
But how do you build these good teams? That's a difficult question, right?
Right.
Now, let me talk from my experience. One is, companies like Tesco, I have found that they invest systematically in programs that build this alignment. They sort of encourage constructive feedback. There are forums in which you sort of continuously sort of learn from each other, and your succession planning is in place all the time, and therefore they endure, right? 90 years, 100 years of successful business leadership. And I think leaders have the most crucial role in this. There is either if you over centralize, which is a common problem, or if you over democratize, which is also another problem, you won't get alignment. You won't get effectiveness. So both can be dicey. So
striking the right balance is important.
The right balance. The second is what leaders communicate, the signaling they do, the kind of roles they allocate, the way the said and the unsaid in organizations, right? And also the complementarity, respect for differences, which leaders have to demonstrate. In reality, what I've also found is that, whatever may be the processes, whatever may be the team building methods, etc., ego, ambition, chemistry, all these things play a very big role in this.
Absolutely.
And winning itself is a glue, right? Teams are winning, then there is teamwork.
Yeah. So as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. It's only when there's a low tide, you discover who's not wearing swimming trunks. So when a company is not doing well, that's when the cracks show up, right? And so, this, while we have teams and teamwork, and, you talked of chemistry and a winning attitude and, leadership that actually walks the talk and demonstrates, right? As opposed to just theorizing, but not really walking the talk. I'm sure in your experience, vast experience that you have encountered multiple situations where there have been conflict amongst teams. And it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be, just chemistry issues, meaning somebody doesn't get along with the boss, or the boss is too overbearing, or two teammates don't like each other, etc. There could be any number of reasons. And there could be problems with the organization itself. It could be issues relating to practices and so on. In your experience, whenever there's a conflict, if you were to advise the CEO of a small or young or an entrepreneurial company, what are some of the things you would talk to them about managing conflict? Because it's such a common thing. It happens regularly.
Yeah, right. I mean, if there is an organization where there are no conflicts, then that would be a surprise, right? So
you probably don't want to be in that company, yeah.
So, and HR people wouldn't have any role.
Exactly.
So if I were to put down a few principles and probably take a couple of examples as well, Sanjay.
Sure.
See, one is, organizations need structures that can break the tie.
Yeah.
See, there are going to be conflicts, right? Mm-hmm. But they have to ultimately sort of have somebody who can sort of at the end of the pipette say that, look, this is hot, this is cold, finally I'm going with this, right? So you need structures that can break the tie. The second is organizations also need what they call heat sinks, where there are wise people whom you can go and talk to, who are able to remind you why we are all here, the purpose, and therefore, sort of make people see the bigger picture and not miss the wood for the trees, right? So
Right.
that's important. We also have to remember that all conflicts need not be settled in a compromise. Some conflicts will end in a separation. It will possibly be better if there is a hard resolution. So, one should also not be very touchy and feely about it, because sometimes these things need a hard resolution.
Correct.
And the place where it can become very tricky is in family businesses, because there conflict has flavors which go beyond just the professional.
Right.
So these are some observations I wanted to make. And then I'll just make 2 points about my own experience with this.
Yeah, that will be useful, especially the experiences.
Yeah. One is, Tesco. Tesco has this, in every organization, there is a power play, right? Commercial in retail is a hugely powerful function. Finance is a hugely powerful function. And but commercial and finance can work only if operations is doing its job, and operations can do its job only if the people function is delivering what it needs, etc., etc.
Right.
So the organization itself had sort of placed a huge value on what they called one team, the Tesco team.
Right.
Where no function was more important than the other, and no person was more important than the other. Everybody was trying hard for customers. That's at a positioning level, it's an important thing to emphasize, right? So that's one example. Coming to an individual conflict, I have found that this kind of conflicts can come because of ideological differences, or they can come because of temperamental or personality differences, right? And, you have to get to the root of it. I have found in one organization, the CEO and the CIO were not meeting eye to eye. And it was better for the CIO to move on, because in the larger purpose of the organization and what for steaming ahead, that was okay. I mean, it would have been rather, there would have been a lot of damage caused if it had been allowed to fester.
Got it.
What I'm trying to say is conflicts sometimes need a hard resolution as well.
Yeah. So if two senior people are seen to be squabbling and arguing and not working in harmony, that kind of, I guess, the feeling of discord tends to very rapidly permeate downwards, right? And
That's right.
That leads to its own snowballing effect. Good point. Now, there's one old adage, right? Typically, you talked about making sure that people hire the right people and spend time in getting quality people inside and then training them and investing in all of that. There's an adage that says one hires for attitude and trains for skill, right? Can you talk to us about that? I mean, if I'm a small company, when I hear somebody tell me at a seminar, hey, you need to hire for attitude and train for skills, I don't know what it means. Can you help explain that?
This is true, but very hard to practice, right?
Yeah, like all such adages are.
That's right. You see, because organizations are operating in real time, they have to, we all know that in the world of IT, where, you have to hire for skills, build them, and you are living quarter to quarter, the ability and willingness to wait and look for the right person with the right attitude and then build the skills is a luxury. Mm-hmm. Let us acknowledge that reality that is there.
Right.
But that said, again, I would go back to, if you are looking to build enduring organizations, which are not just one generation, but multi-generation, then I think this adage is true, right? I mean, if we look at, some of the classic examples, right? Procter and Gamble, Unilever, Asian Paints, generations of success, because they believe that they can develop the skills. What they need is the right caliber and attitude of people.
And therefore, what kinds of attitudes would you look for, which transcend sectors or domains or industries?
Yeah. See, some of these are what shall I say? They have survived. These kind of attributes that I will talk of are true at any time, right? One is demonstrated hard work and an achievement orientation, right? So you need people who have demonstrated that whatever be the circumstances, they have made the most of it. Not everybody may have got equal opportunities, but within those opportunities, has this person done her best or his best? And that's an indication of both hard work and achievement orientation. I think that's a very important element. The second kind of attitude is, are there streaks of collaboration, or is it competition? Does the person come out as a prima donna? The person is very self-centered. The person is very concerned only about her success. Whatever. You can make this out, right? That is damaging in the long run. And the third is, of course, learnability. Can the person adapt to different circumstances, or they are fixated on particular ways? Now, so achievement orientation, hard work, learnability, collaboration are some of the things in the person's attitude which I think matter a lot.
And those are, like you said, they're independent of the specific context of a company, right?
I would think so.
So that's a good set of takeaways for entrepreneur leaders who are listening in. And so if I'm a leader and I am hiring people like this and so on, end of the day, the kind of people I hire impacts company culture, right? And there are different kinds of companies, each has a different culture. And I may not even have worked at that company, but if I hear the name, a visual appears in my head about the kind of company it might be, right? And therefore, talk to us a bit about the importance of culture as part of an organization's own evolution. Why is culture important? I mean, I'm doing very well. I'm an autocratic leader. I don't delegate. I tell people what to do and they do it. Nobody questions me. I don't delegate. All decisions come to me, and company is doing well. And, I'm living a good life. Why should I worry about company culture?
Yeah. This case was made very strongly in that book, Kurt Kaufman and Kathy Sorensen's book.
Yeah.
Is Culture Eats Strategy for Lunch, right?
Yes.
I think that is that point has been made very strongly. But let me talk a bit about what are these, how do you build that culture?
Right.
And some one or two illustrations of that, right? That will be helpful. Right?
Yes.
See, culture is built over time. It doesn't happen overnight, and it is largely done through leadership behavior. And leadership behavior of what we do and what we don't do equally.
Equally important.
Yeah. So I'll give you two illustrations, Sanjay, of what I have seen.
Yes.
One is, way back in the 70s, when Wipro was essentially a Vanaspati company, right? I mean, the Amalner factory was there, and there was a sales representative who traveled second class by train, but claimed second AC fare. And he was entitled to second AC fare, but he was also expected to travel by second AC. He instead traveled by second class and claimed second AC fare and pocketed the difference, right? So this issue came up, there was an inquiry and the person was dismissed and the union went on strike saying that, look, this is too small an offense for such a serious action. Mr. Premji said, look, this is unacceptable in my organization. I just believe that integrity is paramount and this is unacceptable. I am willing to deal with the consequences and I'm not going to budge. So the factory was closed. And for 3 months, I think, the factory remained closed and the losses ran into a few crores. But Mr. Premji did not relent. And subsequently, the union settled it. And what that has done is, while it may have appeared very costly at that time to close a plant for 3 months, for the next 50 years, integrity is non-negotiable in Wipro, right? This is part of folklore now.
Correct.
He was telling me, in fact, if some of you watched that BIC program on him, The Man Beyond the Billions, there was some government officer who apparently said, कि look, Wipro के पास तो जाने का जरूरत ही नहीं है क्योंकि वहाँ कुछ मिलने वाला नहीं है हमारे लिए. So it is, this reputation has got created and that culture of high integrity has got created based on some examples like this, right? And so therefore leadership has to build those examples. I'll give you another,
Yes.
more on the customer side of it.
Yes.
Right? In Tesco, for instance, no one tries harder for customers is a value.
Right.
I have seen this being lived in small ways, but I should pick one example of that. Sir Terry Leahy, who was knighted and who was the CEO and ran $100 billion enterprise, right? Used to be in stores and he would hold some meetings in the stores. And I was watching once when he was there and he was holding a meeting with his senior team. And a customer, a lady, an elderly lady walked up and said, look, I'm not able to find this baked beans. Where is it? I mean, she didn't realize that this was the chairman and CEO of the CEO of Tesco.
$100 billion company.
$100 billion company. And he just stopped the meeting there. He walked to where the baked beans was, picked up the can, came back and handed it over to the lady and then continued. Now, that is demonstration of what you believe, right?
Of customer orientation.
That's right. So culture doesn't get created just like that. It gets created through consistent leadership behavior.
So it's a series of small things that get done by each person every day that in the aggregate forms a company culture.
That's
Would that
right.
be a fair way to say it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now let's say, I've hired good people, based on what you told me with regard to the right attitudes. I put them through some training program, all of that. Now, I find that there is competition in the market, salaries are going up, and I'm still got people who are working hard, high integrity and all of that. But now the challenge is competition has come in, salaries are up, and I need to motivate the team to deliver more or to ensure that, given the company's own constraints, they need to still pull up the socks and deliver. Under such circumstances, how should or what would you tell a leader to do with regard to motivating a team, with regard to inspiring them to do great things, and so on? What are some of the things that a leader needs to keep in mind while thinking about these issues? Obviously, there is no magic bullet. It's highly contextual, but given that, what would be some of the important things they need to keep in mind?
Right. Let me pick 3 things in this, Sanjay. First is purpose.
Right.
You see, that is important. All said and done, people work for organizations with a purpose, and it's for the leader to sort of set those, in jargon, what they call those big, hairy, audacious goals.
Yep.
Right? and they should be credible. They should be goals which are in sight, but just out of reach, kind of, right? So this aspect of purpose and goals motivates people in every kind of organization. So that's very important. The second is leadership behavior itself. Now, even when the chips are down, if the leader is willing to take the hit as much as the people, probably take a greater hit as the people, and when there is an upside, share it generously, give more to people than what he would take. So this kind of leadership behavior is hugely important, right? People may not do what you say, but they will certainly do what you do. So that's a second element. The third, just so that I don't sound very HR-ish and I have completely, people say that, look, he very carefully skirted the issue of money. No, I'm going to speak of the money. Money is important, and but we should realize some things about the money aspect of it, right? One is it has varying impact on different kinds of individuals. You can't uniformly assume that money is the motivator for everybody. It depends on where in the Maslow's hierarchy people are and at what life stage they are, and so on and so forth. So please use the money as a motivator very carefully. That's one. The second is the absolute money you pay is not the motivator, is the relative money you pay relative in the team.
Very true.
That becomes the motivator or the demotivator. Right?
Why did that person get more than me? That kind of thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And lastly, incentive structures have to be built in such a way that there is alignment to, of course, individuals' contribution, but also to the team's achievement and the organization's achievement, and so on and so forth. So any entrepreneur who's building an organization might want to focus on the purpose, on the leadership, and then the money.
Right. Because what I have found is that somebody who joins you for money because you pay more will also leave you for money, because there is no relationship beyond just the pure monetary aspect. Correct?
That's right.
Talking about this issue of compensation, money, and all of that, in addition to compensation, right, there are other, let's say, benefits that a company needs to think about vis-a-vis the employees. It could be non-monetary, and culture is an important part. I mean, people must wake up in the morning wanting to go to work because the environment, the office, the colleagues, the work, etc. itself is exciting, right? That is one aspect of it. There are also certain benefits that a company offers. It could be, maternity, paternity leave. It could be healthcare. It could be, learning opportunities, and so on. Can you talk a bit about that, about the non-monetary benefits that a company should consider or can consider, such that it meets with the objective of developing people, motivating people, ensuring that they feel good and wake up in the morning wanting to come to work? What can you just help us understand that?
Yeah. So, on the monetary aspect itself, compensation itself, I'll take a minute.
Please.
Sanjay. See, that has to be designed carefully, in line with the strategy of the organization. What element is long-term, what is short-term, what is fixed, what is variable? How do you position yourself on the pay point vis-a-vis your market? Weightage that you give for benefits and cash in hand, equity within the organization. So it's this whole compensation matter itself has to be very carefully thought through, and that requires application of mind.
So would you, one quick interrupt, Sudesh, would you recommend, or let's say, I suppose that would be the right word, would you recommend to CEOs, leaders of companies, that they consider some equity compensation for people so that there's alignment and a feeling of ownership? What would you suggest?
Yeah, see, I am a believer in that.
Okay.
It certainly builds a shared ownership
Right.
And I think that's the equitable thing to do for a leader. And therefore, I would certainly encourage that. The problem with that is, you know, there have been times when such equity options have been favored, and there have been times when they have not been favored, right? So when the markets are down and there is no upside, then people dismiss stock options. And, therefore, in principle, I do think that, it's a good thing to do, and leaders should think about it. Now, coming to your second question on, or rather the main question about, the benefits itself. See, that's again, if you want to build long-term loyalty of people and make it feel like, the organization has my back, then benefits have to be carefully thought through. The value of benefits is seen during adversity.
Right. Right.
During this whole COVID time, organizations that have had good medical insurance policies, family covers, people which provided them hospitalization benefits, etc. It's immense, right? I mean, the value of that is phenomenal. Now, just cash in hand wouldn't help.
Correct.
Kind of long-term benefits which organizations should invest in is what builds long-term loyalty. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
Keep in mind. Now, one of the other issues typically that, since our audience base is largely, let's say, entrepreneurs and folks running or working with smaller businesses as compared to the larger organizations like Tesco or Wipro and so on. If I'm running a small organization, right, and how do I go about hiring people and building a team? Because there's just me and my good friend from college, and we've all come together and we've decided to do something, and we made some progress, and maybe my rich uncle has put in some money, and now I need to find and hire the right set of people. How should I go about it? What should I think about while going out and recruiting people or hiring people? It's not like I'm going to put an ad on LinkedIn, right? I mean, it's got to be some mechanism that I devote. Can you sort of talk a bit about that? I will also add my thoughts because that's a question that's come in. So I thought we will sort of segue into that.
Right. Yeah. See, any enterprise that we want to build, the initial team that you recruit is going to matter the most.
Right.
I mean, I know you have often quoted this, that look, A-class people or A category people hire
A category people, B category,
and B category ends up hiring C category.
That's right.
Now, this is something you have said often, and I think particularly without any value judgment on categorization, I would just make the point that it is very important to hire good people, even more important during the initial phase.
Correct.
Now, what that means is it has to come through the personal investment of time by the CEO. It can't, it's not a delegatable function.
That's right.
The CEO needs to do that and get people who are aligned with her purpose or his purpose, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of this happens through networks.
So it's important, A, to have a network, B,
absolutely
utilize the network.
Absolutely. You need that network, one, to get the outreach to people, but also to validate that your decision is right. I mean, you won't recruit at those levels in the initial phases people whom you don't know.
Correct.
People, right? And where does that come from? It comes from networks.
Correct.
And lastly, be generous, both with your time as well as with the money. Money meaning in terms of the opportunities that you give for people to grow their wealth.
Right.
In the beginning.
Right. In fact, I think you made two an excellent points about the CEO needs to take the leadership in hiring the initial set of A-grade people. and the second was about making sure that one is generous, right? Two quick anecdotes here, there's a story about Jeff Bezos of Amazon. In the very early days, he was doing pretty much everything, and he wanted to hire this senior person as a vice president. And in the course of the hiring, he found that he couldn't afford this person and this person was being courted by a lot of the larger organizations and very generous. So Jeff Bezos relentlessly pursued this guy, and that guy said, "Look, thanks so much. I'm excited by what you're doing. It's a brand new young company. I don't know much about it, but I'm impressed by you and what you're attempting to do and your vision. But you know what? I'm sorry I can't talk to you now. I'm off on a break. I'm off to Mexico. I'll meet you next week if I don't pick anything in the meantime." So he boards a flight, and then what does Jeff Bezos do? Jeff Bezos is relentless. So he also buys a ticket on that same flight and travels with this guy and persuades him. And at the end of that trip and all of that, he's come back with a signed employment agreement with this guy. And we all know about the Steve Jobs and John Scully story, right? Who was the president of Pepsi, who joins Apple. And Steve Jobs tells him, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want to change the world?" So that's the sense of purpose. And about generous, there's another story which again, I heard firsthand from Vinod Khosla when he started Sun Microsystems back in 1982. He was at Stanford and he was building this company, and he wanted a hardware person to design the computers. And he found that there was a guy called Andy Bechtolsheim, who's a legend in computer networks, who was building hardware. And so he went to him and said, "Andy, I'm starting this company. I want you to join." Andy says, "What's in it for me? I mean, I've already designed this computer and I'm selling the license for $10,000. If you want, you pay me $10,000. You take the license to the design and go build your company. I don't see any value in joining you." So it was at that time that Vinod Khosla said, "I gave up 50% of my stake to get Andy on board, because I told Andy, I don't want the golden eggs. I want the goose that lays the golden eggs." And I gave up 50% of my shareholding, right? Now, that was a phenomenal thing back in 1981. And he says, "It was the greatest decision I have taken." So the point you made about being generous, because that without this person, it's going to be impossible. And because the value you create is going to be so huge that it's worthwhile to have the right people on your side, as opposed to have them on the other side fighting against you, right? I mean, that would be one other way to think of this. So moving on from that and coming to, another important point about this whole area of, let's say, work-life balance. We're nearing the end of our session, but let me just end perhaps with this. In companies, the culture tends to be, "I will not go home till the boss goes home," right? And boss has a habit of leaving office only at 10 p.m. So, so I stay back till 10 p.m. Right? And, and they have all these kinds of cultural things that impact how people manage their work and their life and all of that. What would you say to such a situation?
Yeah. Well, this is a common failing, isn't it, Sanjay, where
Yes.
We tend to sort of overemphasize the time input as opposed to the output, right? I mean, bosses tend to sort of, expect people to work long hours, be in office, go after they leave. And that becomes the barometer of judging a person's performance.
Correct.
Unfortunate, right? But that is what it is. And some organizations I have found, I mean, people have told me that, look, that's a very dominant part of the culture and it's toxic, but it's there, right? I think the COVID times have put a bit of a break on that.
Right.
And with remote working and, there is a greater emphasis on productivity, effectiveness, as opposed to just input. So I think the world has changed a bit. I think bosses are also a little more, understanding now that, people don't have to necessarily work under their nose for long hours.
Right.
Uh, so the world is changing for the better is my feeling, Sanjay.
Okay, that's good. At least it's an optimistic note there. Another question has come in from Shreyoshi. So she asks, in the early days when, I don't have much cash or to offer and I'm chasing some of the best people that I can lay my hands on, how should I approach them? What's my, let's say, secret weapon that I can use to join in the absence of throwing money at them? What are the other things I can talk about?
Yeah. Well, I'll perhaps go back to some of the things that we covered in this, Sanjay.
Yeah.
I don't have anything new to say on this.
Sure.
But, Shreyoshi will have to personally invest time and sell the vision and the prospects, right? I mean, whatever Steve Jobs did has to be done,
Yeah.
right? So that is because you don't have the kind of money to sort of attract people who expect top dollar. So therefore, the only thing you have is the vision, the purpose, and the prospects, which you need to personally communicate and evangelize. So that's one.
Right.
The second is what you said, which is, be generous. And third is, in fact, if somebody is coming only for the money, then probably they're not the right hire.
Mm.
People have to come for the purpose. And it may be the passion for a particular technology, or it may be the passion for a particular social purpose. It could be anything, but you have to, and this one of the entrepreneurs told me this, that look, money is something they can manage, but if you get the person who is not aligned to the purpose, then you have a bigger problem.
Right.
So
that's an important point, right? I mean, which means that people need to think about purpose. Meaning, if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a leader, I'm a CEO, what's the purpose of this organization and why should somebody give up their current job and join? Either they are desperate because they don't have other options, or I'm throwing big money in the absence of purpose, right? I mean, it's one of the two. And both of them are undesirable and correct. And that's an important situation. All right. One question is coming from Mira Harish. Is there an example of a superstar CEO, but who also is able to lead by example and also creates superstars in the leadership team? I mean, I can think of one example in response to Mira's, but I live, you're far more experienced. I will leave it, and then I'll follow up after you.
Yeah, let me try. Again, I should speak from personal example of people I know.
Yes.
And somebody who stands out for me is Bharat Puri, who is the CEO of Pidilite.
Right.
Who was earlier the category head of Cadbury worldwide, Mondelez.
Right.
Many people who worked for or with Bharat have also become superstars, right?
Right.
Chandramouli Venkatesan, who became the CEO of Cadbury, unfortunately passed away recently, was with Bharat. Vipul Prakash, who is the COO of Make My Trip, was with Bharat.
Yes.
Subramaniam, CEO of Saint-Gobain, was with Bharat. I can just keep on going with hundreds of names like that. And superstar CEO, and has built several generations of leaders who also become superstars.
Correct. And I think, so the important thing is not only were they superstars in their personal, let's say, attitude and leadership style. I think what was really wonderful is that they created this layer below them, right? And which spawned a lot of other superstars as well, right? I think that was a wonderful thing. And, we've seen a lot of, let's say, younger, smaller companies that have been able to do the exact same thing, where people have built a great platform, and then others have stepped out and gone out and done other businesses successfully. Now, but they're obviously not in the media in the sense that everybody thinks of them as superstars, right? But I think your examples are well made. So that kind of, let me just see if there are any more questions coming in. And it's 6 minutes past 5. Is what we spent exactly an hour or so. One last question for you, Sudesh, before I move on to the next phase. That is, in today's environment, and clearly COVID is occupying everybody's mind, and hopefully same time next year COVID would be less of a issue in everybody's mind. uh, for those who are in business now, or those who are starting businesses now, how should they think about building the org culture and managing people, given that there is a work from home? There is no real opportunity to meet and sort of build relationships and things like that. What would you say to them?
Yeah. See, um, while some of the principles that we talked about through this session are eternal and they will hold, specifically in the current circumstances, a couple of things. I think it is even more important to be in touch with people. And it is virtual, I know, and it is online. But being in touch with people, even though we don't get to meet at office, communicating even more than before, I think is very important. That's number one.
Constant communication.
Constant communication. Second, I also think that it's important to celebrate success. People are, I mean, if you are meeting, there are constant positive reinforcements that you are getting. If you don't have that, it's all the more important that you find opportunities to celebrate success, even though it is online.
Right.
That's, I think, going to be
important thing for people.
So, in addition to all that we spoke, perhaps these are two that come to my mind.
Important. I think it's very, very important. That is communication, and I think it's an important point because we don't communicate enough, particularly in today's day and age. So just hang on for a second, Sudesh. Let me because I want to talk about the importance of, let's say, one sec. About the, just a minute. I want to make a quick announcement, actually. The announcement is that, the Arohana Business Plan Challenge will start towards the end of January, will continue till the end of February. And everyone, this is informing all the attendees to stay wary and keep your eyes peeled for the announcement. And we would like all of you to participate in that. So I just wanted to make that brief announcement. And so thank you very much, Sudesh, for participating and spending an hour of your time today. Your insights were very, very helpful, useful to, and more than anything, I think it was very interesting as well to all of us. All that remains for me is to thank you on behalf of NICE and behalf of the organizing group, on behalf of all the attendees and everybody else. So thanks very much.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity and all the best to NICE.
And also, I think, we can follow us on social media, as we move to on our LinkedIn pages and everything else. And so that will be good. So please do follow us there. And the next session that we have is on the 23rd, where we have Chinu Srinivasan, who will be talking about managing the self. We've heard from Sudesh about managing teams, hiring teams, building culture, and all of that. But how do you manage yourself? How do you motivate yourself? How do you dive into personal leadership and so on? So that will be a session with Chinu Srinivasan on the 23rd, same time, 4 p.m. Look forward to all of you joining again. Please spread the word, tell everybody. Until then, goodbye, namaste, and hope you really enjoyed this. Thanks once again, Sudesh.
Thanks, Sanjay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.